This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Nations try different containment measures as the coronavirus cases rise above 880,000. Authorities in Tunisia beginning using robots to enforce anti-coronavirus measures. And focus on your mental health as staying at home and financial worries increase during the COVID-19 pandemic. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague, Rama, who has our business headlines.
That's right, Richard. Here's what's coming up in business. China's president is calling for a balance between fighting the COVID-19 pandemic and restarting economic activity. And we'll explore why Zimbabwe's reverted to a multi-currency regime. The details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Richard.
Thanks a lot, Rama. Coronavirus numbers continue soaring across the world, with the United Kingdom now seeing its most deaths in one day. The United Nations is calling the pandemic humanity's worst crisis since World War II. 900 more people died in the United States, bringing its death toll above 4,000. The number of cases surged by 24,000, approaching 200,000, the most in the world. Italy has seen the most deaths. 12,000 have died there. Over 100,000 people are infected in Spain. It saw a record of over 860 new deaths on Wednesday. Iran has reported over 3,000 deaths. The Chinese mainland saw 36 new infections. Only one was identified as a domestic case. It's in the Guangdong province. Nearly 94% of patients have recovered in China. 76,000 people have been released from the hospital, and active cases have dropped below 1,300 in Hubei province. Across the globe, the number of infections is approaching 900,000, and more than 44,000 people have died. Spain saw its worst day yet on Tuesday from the virus. The number of cases and deaths hit new records. The country now has over 100,000 cases. Our correspondent Rahul Pathak has more from Madrid.
It's difficult to suggest or difficult to say that they've reached the peak because the figure that we have today of the daily death toll is 864 over the last 24 hours, and it's such a shocking figure. It's hard to sort of justify that we are getting on top of this, we are stabilising, but also, and this is something that the authorities are trying to say, that death tolls can be ever so slightly misleading. They can be influenced by a whole variety of issues which they have no control over. The fact is, though, that it's been the fifth day that we've seen the daily death toll exceed 800. That is a trend. You can't get away from that, and that in itself is a concerning figure. But in terms of the situation easing or stabilising, healthcare professionals here in Spain have been reported as saying that they feel that the situation in the hospitals is actually easing, and that is in part thanks to the confinement measures that have been put in place. The lockdown that began just over 2 weeks ago, the lockdown that was actually extended and now increased a few days ago on Monday. They feel that they have got a lid on the new infections, and they need a now further push to make sure they can really make the new infection numbers go into reverse and to really get a lid on this crisis.
The United States has the world's highest number of confirmed cases of the coronavirus infection. New York is struggling with a biting shortage of equipment and medical staff. For details of the latest measures to contain the situation, let's go live to Washington, D.C. Our reporter Simon Marks is joining us from there. Simon, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. What's the latest in America and in America's efforts to deal with the coronavirus, and how is New York coping?
Well, Richard, as you know, the death toll here has continued to rise. It topped 4,000 overnight here in the United States. The governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, is briefing reporters right now. As we heard from the White House a few hours ago, the public health experts advising the president believe that the peak of infections in New York City will occur in the next 2 weeks. But Governor Cuomo says that is not necessarily the case. He believes that there are models out there that show the peak of infections could still be 6 or 7 weeks away, and that with every piece of data that public health experts are able to gather, they change their models and therefore their projections. He is urging New Yorkers to embrace the safe distancing, social distancing guidelines, to stay at home. He says he's very worried that young people in New York are failing to adhere to the rules. As a result, he's announced the closure of all playgrounds in New York City, and he's warning governors and mayors all over the country not to be complacent. He says to them that while New York is very much the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak in the United States now, what's happening in New York today, he said, could be happening in your jurisdictions tomorrow. And he's urging everyone to learn the lessons that New York has already learned as it struggles to contain this outbreak.
All right, Simon, thanks for the update. But let me ask you, the U.S. aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt has been in the news in the last 24 hours as the captain pleads for help. What's the latest on this?
Yeah, absolutely extraordinary developments. The nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, has docked in Guam after initially 20 sailors on board contracted COVID-19. That number has now risen above 100. With a full complement of 5,000 sailors on board, the commanding officer of the ship has written a letter to the Pentagon that leaked to the San Francisco Chronicle, in which he is pleading with the Pentagon to help him and evacuate the ship and separate those sick with the coronavirus from those who have not yet fallen ill. He's warning that there will be losses of life on board the ship unless something is done. The Defense Secretary Mark Esper here, last time he was questioned about this publicly, said that he had not yet read the letter from the commanding officer, but he did not believe that the evacuation of the aircraft carrier was necessary. The acting Secretary of the Navy is indicating that steps are being taken in Guam to find enough accommodation for the sailors so that some kind of an evacuation can begin. But a real sense of concern, certainly by the captain of the ship, and also, of course, for the families of those sailors on board as coronavirus continues to course through the ship's crew.
All right, let's leave it there. Simon Marks, thank you for that update and report. Excellent reporting live from Washington, D.C. Moving on, South Africa's government has taken several proactive measures to combat the spread of COVID-19. Among them is rolling out a mass screening program. So far, over 39,000 people have been tested for the coronavirus. CGTN's Asta Tal has more.
10,000 field workers like these have been dispatched across South Africa. In the Johannesburg township of Alexandra, healthcare workers are testing residents following the confirmation of one case in the area.
Presently, we have discovered some people in this area, and that's why we focus today specifically in this particular area.
Field workers will refer those with symptoms to local or mobile clinics for further testing. Those displaying severe symptoms will be referred to hospitals. If someone tests positive but they display no or moderate symptoms, they will remain in home isolation or in a government-provided facility. However, waiting for the testing results can cause some residents to feel anxious.
I have to be scared because I don't know my results yet, because this sickness is a serious disease. People are dying, so we are taking it serious. So before you get the results, you are obviously going to be scared because you don't know where you stand.
South Africans are currently on a 21-day lockdown. It is the only country in sub-Saharan Africa to roll out a mass screening campaign. Asta Tal, CGTN.
Innova Robotics is the first company in Africa and the MENA region that builds its own robots. The Tunisian startup specializes in developing mechanical systems that can autonomously navigate. Authorities in Tunisia have deployed the robots to enforce the country's lockdown and help prevent the spread of coronavirus.
Pearl Guard robot is patrolling in the capital city Tunis. This scene has become familiar since the beginning of the general lockdown and the coronavirus outbreak in Tunisia.
What are you doing here? Show me your ID. Are you aware of the general lockdown measures? You must respect the rules and go home.
The robot is a four-wheel drive mobile base powered by electric motors and batteries, allowing it to patrol for up to 8 hours in the governorate of the Greater Tunis district.
Tunisia is fighting a deadly virus and disease. The Commission of Security and Defense at Parliament approves the use of robot and the latest technology to protect citizens and security agents from COVID-19.
Citizens are proud of this made in Tunisia robot. The machine can ask questions and interact with the public.
Without the coronavirus crisis, the robot would never have been used. The authorities seized the opportunity for public interest. I respect the robot like any police agent.
This is a good initiative. We hope the technology and robots will also be used in the health sector and the administration to limit direct contact and stop this contamination.
A remote interface is provided with Pearl Guard. It allows policemen to manually control the robot remotely from the central command unit at the Interior Ministry or any police station or patrol across the country.
Innova Robotics has developed a new machine which is dedicated to healthcare. The system was built for elderly people to keep social contact with their families. The updated version will be used at hospitals to communicate with patients infected with coronavirus. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Zimbabwe has been completing an upgrade to the country's main COVID-19 isolation center. The $500,000 upgrade was funded by the Chinese business community through the Chinese embassy. CGTN's Farai Mwakatuya with the details.
Soon after the global COVID-19 outbreak began, Zimbabwe designated Wilkins Hospital in Harare as the national isolation center. But the aging facility wasn't equipped to deal with the disease, a shortcoming that was exposed by the death of its first admitted patient. That prompted the Chinese companies in Zimbabwe to donate $500,000 for its upgrade.
In the space of just 2 weeks, old fixtures and fittings have been replaced. New electricity connections have been applied. Broken down water pipes and plumbing have been repaired, and a new coat of paint has been applied, all of which has given this facility a new look. But that's just the first phase of the work that's been done here.
Attention has now turned to medical equipment.
We're actually in the process of installing the equipment, the various ICU beds, the ventilators, the monitors. So we are now doing that. Infrastructure side has been sorted out. So we are now preparing to admit our next patient. There's backup electricity, there's backup water, there's backup almost everything now.
The hospital's capacity has also been increased from 35 beds to 60, 10 of which are intensive care units.
We were only able at this facility to manage those patients who were not in severe respiratory distress. Now we can manage those that are in severe respiratory distress. Of course, not in the numbers that we would want or the numbers that we expect, but at least there is something that we can now offer to our. We are clinicians, we know what a patient needs. It's so frustrating knowing that a patient needs this, but the facility cannot offer it.
The completion of works couldn't have come at a better time.
From a public health point of view, I think now we are beginning to experience the outbreak. The next week or two will be telling. We may have a lot of patients coming to our facilities. We may have a lot of patients coming to other facilities who then get referred to this facility.
The assistance from China has helped Zimbabwe be better prepared than it was when it recorded its first case. Farai Mwakatuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Many African countries have expressed their appreciation for China's assistance to their health sectors in the fight against the coronavirus. All African states have now received China's donation of thousands of COVID-19 test kits, masks, and protective kits. CGTN's Gerun Chala tells us more.
all the 60 million masks, 1.1 million testing kits, and 60,000 protective suits were received at the Addis Ababa hub less than a week ago. Now, the 6-day logistical operation by Ethiopian Airlines has delivered all the medical aid from the Jack Ma Foundation to all 54 African states. Many people in countries that receive the medical consignments have hailed China's gesture of continued support to the African states. Here in Ethiopia, for instance, from ordinary citizens to medical workers, from health officials to the Prime Minister himself, they all speak of how significant China's medical aid is in Ethiopia's battle against the spread of the coronavirus. Those sentiments are shared in the rest of Africa. From Djibouti to Nigeria, from Egypt to South Africa, DR Congo, Mali, and Rwanda, China's medical equipment provision to their respective nations is highly appreciated. The officials of the Africa Centers for Disease Control say the aid is not only timely for Africa, but crucial in preventing death and sufferings associated with COVID-19. At the moment, China is sending millions of much-needed medical masks, gloves, and testing kits to the United States and Europe. Grumchala, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You are watching Africa Live on CGTN. We'll see you on the other side of the break with more news. Here's a look at the headlines. To cope with school closures, some parents in Zimbabwe turn to homeschooling for their children. And Chad deploys soldiers in Nigeria and Niger to battle Boko Haram.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. The commander of U.S. troops in South Korea has called for negotiators to quickly resolve a cost-sharing dispute. It comes after 4,000 South Korean staff were put on unpaid leave on Wednesday as Seoul and Washington argue over who pays for U.S. forces there. The dispute follows a U.S. demand for Seoul to pay up to $5 billion a year to support the troop presence, up from $870 million under last year's agreement. South Korean officials suggest an agreement could come soon. The government of Chad has deployed soldiers to Niger and Nigeria in a counter-offensive against Boko Haram terrorist group. In March, a Boko Haram group killed 98 soldiers during an attack on a military base in the Lake Chad region. The Chadian government has now declared the Lak province a war zone. Boko Haram launched an insurgency in 2009 in northeastern Nigeria. It later spread to neighboring Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, prompting military responses. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says more than 30,000 people have been killed and nearly 3 million displaced due to the insurgency. Well, there are also reports that Nigeria has removed the commander of its counterterrorism operations in the Northeast. Let's get the details from our reporter, Phil Ihaza, joining us live from Abuja. Once again, Phil Ihaza, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Phil, what more do we know about the changes in the Nigeria counterterrorism unit in the Northeast?
Well, thank you, Richard. What we know is that indeed there's been a confirmation from the Nigerian military about the reshuffling of top officers in the Nigerian army. Of course, the former commander of the operation in the northeast, that's Operation Lafia Dole, Major General Olusegun Adeniyi was reshuffled, and more other officers were replaced for that position. But the army has said that the reason is it's a routine exercise. It's based on achieving more professional efficiency. That's actually the word in the words of the response from the Nigerian military. But it is definitely not unconnected. A lot of security analysts, people have said that it is not unconnected to the fact that a video surfaced online and trended on social media just about a day or 2 days ago, and where the Major General was seen, that's the one that was removed from that particular position, was seen as giving a detailed report to the military, saying that there were several casualties as a result of not enough information for the troops at that point, and that they were losing not just men but ammunition. They were losing resources as a result of the fact that information was not properly disseminated and all that. So I've spoken to a few security analysts, and they're saying that of course it's a fact that he came out and that video actually leaked to the public, and the Nigerian military will not want any sense of looking weak to the war as regards the fight against insurgency.
Well, Phil, Chad has reportedly deployed soldiers to Nigeria and Niger to hunt down Boko Haram. Break it down for us. How is this going to work?
Well, Richard, at the moment, there's actually a video trending on social media showing, Chadian military forces already jubilating for some kind of success that they say they've achieved in the fight. As you called it there, a war zone. A few days ago, we saw the president of Chad himself, Idris Deby, leading, some battalion of his army, Chadian forces, to that region, the Lake Chad region. Of course, he said it's with the permission of Nigeria and Niger, because they share borders, and so he's led about 5 company of soldiers to that region to, as a response to some, news about a week or 2 ago where about 97 soldiers, nearly 100 of Chadian forces fell to attacks, ambushed by the insurgents Boko Haram. There's also, some local media reports about an audio released by the Boko Haram leader Abubakar Shekau, consoling his men, the terrorists that must have fallen as a result of this response, and also threatening more attacks on the Chadian forces and of course the country. But security operatives were saying that, or rather security analysts are saying that the community in that region will actually suffer more for this attack, because it's a war zone. In fact, the president, Idris Deby, has said that the forces should actually engage in a merciless operation. That's the word he used. So we're just hoping that, the citizens, the residents in that area, especially most of them that are displaced, would have to find a way to move to another region that is safer. And we hope also that this will deal a big blow to the insurgents and reduce their attacks in the coming days.
Phil Ihaza talking to us live from Abuja. Phil, thank you for keeping a close eye on that story. Moving on, as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to spread, many parents are having to homeschool their children. In Zimbabwe, parents are having to turn into teachers to help their little ones with some final assignments. CGTN's Farai Wakatuya caught up with a family in Harare to see how they're holding up.
It's Tuesday morning. Grace Chingombe should be at work and her children in school. But a 21-day lockdown has them all at home. They're trying to keep things as close to normal as possible under the unusual circumstances. So that means schoolwork for the young ones under mommy's watchful eye.
Hanging out with my family, getting to learn more of my subjects, the new curriculum at home, and having homework. It's been quite hectic with in this lockdown.
The learning is for both children and parents.
The kids were given homework by their teachers, and it's quite different now, because before they were given probably 2 subjects a day. but now we have to do more than 3 subjects a day in order to keep up with the curriculum. It's quite challenging because professionally I'm not a teacher, and doing all that work is quite hectic because there is a lot of research that needs to be done. At times I have to go and Google the stuff, the homework, in order to give the kids adequate information.
To maintain a balance, the schedule has time for extracurricular activities and play, which the children try to make the most of without their school friends. No one knows what will happen after the 21-day lockdown, but the Chingombes are prepared for any eventuality.
If this lockdown continues, we are forced to continue giving the kids more information, continue to study with them, continue to go through the correct syllabus with them, with the guidance of the teachers, because they continue to send in information, homework and guidelines through WhatsApp.
It may not come to that because a number of schools here have begun testing e-learning platforms that will allow teachers to teach online. It's the direction education was going here already anyway, but at a slow pace. That's now likely to be sped up to make sure that no further school time is lost. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
The impact of COVID-19 on mental health is a concern that's been raised globally. From the isolation of being in lockdown to the uncertainty and financial instability resulting from the pandemic, millions are struggling. But as Isobel Ewing reports, there are also many people finding ways to make the best of the adversity, especially when getting exercise is one of the only times Hungarians can leave their homes.
The dog.
Getting into the park is a tonic for those coping with both isolation and the stress of financial losses caused by COVID-19. Marisha Ananiuska is one of them.
Well, the change was quite dramatic because I teach music for kids and for adults as well, so it's a lot of personal contact. So all of that is kind of cancelled now.
She says the companionship from her dog and cat is invaluable amid the uncertainty and strain of losing income.
Well, I think I'd die without them, like really, because they bring so much joy. Well, I know that if it comes to worse, I can still walk my dog.
In Hungary, a group of mental health workers, psychologists and counsellors have been offering their services for free to people who need support.
I have time, and I know there are so many people just cannot afford to pay today because of losing their job, because of stucking in their homes.
Attila Giuliani has also lost his job because of the pandemic, but he believes that the community he's formed will endure beyond the coronavirus lockdown. He encourages others to think the same way.
Those who are able to show themselves and to help to contribute over themselves, they will be the winner of this crisis. Because if you are there right now, people will remember you. So this is what I can suggest from my heart.
Ananiuska's already there. Part of her regular income comes from hosting a paint and drink night, which she's now taken online.
I prepared packages with art supplies, and I took my bike yesterday and I delivered to each person.
UN Children's Agency UNICEF has posted advice online for anyone coping with anxiety due to the coronavirus pandemic. It says people should do anything that helps bring them down from a heightened emotional state and makes them feel comfortable, whether that be wearing a mask and gloves in public, incorporating a walk or yoga into their daily routine, or simply doing something they can control, like cleaning the house.
We are not alone. We are not. All the differences we have just became unimportant today.
Advice that we might all do well to remember. Isabel Ewing, CGTN, Budapest.
The news continues on Africa Live. Over to Rama for the latest in business.
Thank you very much, Richard. Here's what's coming up in business news. China's head of state is calling for balance between fighting the COVID-19 pandemic and restarting economic activity. And we'll explore why Zimbabwe has gone back to the multi-currency regime.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. China's head of state, Xi Jinping, is stressing the need to balance fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, but also restarting economic activity. He wrapped up a 4-day tour of factories and ports in one of China's largest trading hubs. Zhang Chunying reports from Zhejiang province.
This is President Xi's first trip outside Beijing since March 10th, when he inspected Wuhan, where the coronavirus outbreak began. Zhejiang province is one of the biggest national trading hubs. On the first leg of his tour, Xi visited the Transhan port area of the Ningbo Zhoushan port with a throughput that has been fully restored.
I hope the staff at the Zhoushan port could make great achievements after overcoming all the difficulties.
President Xi also said the port took the lead in resuming operation, which is important in restoring the logistics system and global industrial chains. He called for efforts to cope with global restrictive measures on cargo shipping and to facilitate trade. He said the Zhoushan port plays an important role in initiatives such as the Belt and Road, the Yangtze River Economic Belt and integration of the Yangtze River Delta. He also visited an industrial park that produces high-end auto parts and the modes in Ningbo. The president inspected a private manufacturer, where he stressed the government's support for smaller companies. President Xi also visited a village where he stressed ecological protection and met some residents. And the president inspected the wetland conservation and the technology-based urban management system in the provincial capital, Hangzhou. Zhang Chunying, CGTN.
On to Zimbabwe. The government there has reinstated the multi-currency regime. It's also restored the peg for its local unit to the American dollar, and it's cut lending rates. All of this in response to the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. But the measures, which are a massive U-turn from the policies implemented less than a year ago, may not necessarily have the desired impact. CGTN's Farai Muktuya explains.
Just weeks after claiming de-dollarization was on course, the central bank has made a dramatic about turn by allowing the use of the US dollar again.
This is actually a tacit admission by the government that the Zimbabwean dollar has had disastrous consequences on the local economy. It's another case of policy inconsistency. However, it's a welcome move for the local productive sector. We have been feeling the pinch of inflation.
The measure is seen as an attempt to mobilize foreign currency held outside the formal channels. Central bank reserves, which are drawn from export revenues, have been stripped down to a minimum due to COVID-19 induced disruptions. However, the reintroduction of a pegged exchange rate could militate against efforts to mop up the greenback and fuel further activity on the parallel market.
People do have US dollars. If you look at the informal sector and a lot of the SME sector, they do have the US dollars, but they will not go and buy at TM if the rate is going to be 1:25. If the rate was the market rate or people were allowed to set market rates, then the strategy can work in terms of mobilizing those US dollars.
What it effectively means is that we will have less liquidity on the interbank market, because all the formal businesses that have been actually liquidating their foreign currency proceeds on the interbank market see losses, because you can be able to liquidate on the black market and gain more.
Critics argue it's futile for the central bank to try to set an exchange rate when it doesn't have the foreign currency reserves to back it up. The country's apex bank has also lowered its benchmark lending rate from 35 to 25% to try and stimulate more borrowing and thus activity in an economy that was already in distress before the coronavirus outbreak and which is now likely to see further decline after it. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
On to South Africa, where the Reserve Bank has launched a bond buying program to help the struggling economy. Now, ideally, the program should provide some liquidity in the market. South Africa's economy was already in a technical recession in the second half of 2019, and the COVID-19 pandemic is already making matters worse. CGTN's Richard Nta now reports.
The spread of COVID-19 is having a severe impact on the economy and has prompted the South African Reserve Bank to intervene.
The mandate of the Reserve Bank, however, does include ensuring the smooth functioning of the South African financial markets. And we saw a situation where the foreign selling of South African bonds had been so extreme in such a short period that it had actually gummed up the system and effectively used up the balance sheet capacity of the market makers. This was creating an unsustainable dislocation within the financial markets, and it made complete sense for the Reserve Bank to step in just to remedy or to address this dislocation.
The bank announced this week that it started a program to buy government bonds.
Basically, is what you call open market operation, where the bank, to supply liquidity, it secures bonds, thereby supply cash into the financial system, ensuring that there's enough liquidity for banks to try and sustain also their own intervention, supplying individuals, supporting businesses in this crisis.
Buying bonds can be a risky move. Foreigners can sell off their SA government bonds and pull out their money. A program like this could also see a sell-off in the currency.
The bid-offer spread on bonds was 100 basis points wide. Today it's only 5 basis points wide. From that perspective, I think it has been a highly successful intervention from the Reserve Bank.
The Reserve Bank has never liked intervening in the currency or financial markets, but most economists agree this was a good move considering the current circumstances.
The Reserve Bank's decision to implement quantitative easing is quite welcome. The injections of liquidity into the money markets and buying of government bonds in the secondary markets should help to inject liquidity, particularly into the banking system.
This is very, very comprehensive by government, and we believe that post the crisis, we won't be as worse off as we'll be had we not intervened.
With South Africa now officially on lockdown, all businesses have had to stop their operations and will remain closed for 3 weeks. Only essential services like food retailers, pharmacies and medical facilities will be allowed to operate. These must-have measures will have a serious impact on business and the overall economy going forward. Samitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Tunisia's Minister of Energy and Mining says the reduction in prices of petroleum products in the country should take place from around mid-April. While prices have fallen by over 60% so far this year, following a supply glut and an unprecedented decline in demand around the world. Specifically in Tunisia, fossil fuel consumption has fallen by over 25%.
Tunisian authorities announced that this possible reduction in prices also comes as a result of the evaluation of average prices within the framework of the automatic and quarterly adjustment mechanism of hydrocarbon prices.
The committee in charge of the automatic adjustment of prices at the Ministry of Energy will be in charge of evaluation of current prices on the international market and their impact on prices on the domestic market at the end of March.
Crude oil prices have declined significantly this month, impacting the prices of petroleum products in Tunisia. Gas stations across the country have reported a sharp reduction in their activity.
We've seen only a dozen of cars since the beginning of the general lockdown and the curfew over the coronavirus crisis. We used to have over 1,000 cars per day. We are losing money every day because people are avoiding to use their cars.
The automatic oil price adjustment mechanism was put in place in July 2016. It is not based on the price per barrel of crude oil, but on the prices of petroleum products after refining. More than 70% of these products are imported. Consumers have welcomed lower prices.
We will be paying less for our energy. This is the only good news after coronavirus outbreak. However, people stay at home and avoid taking taxis out of fear of infection.
The state budget for 2020 was made on the basis of $50 per barrel of crude oil for the first quarter of this year. The automatic price adjustment mechanism is not based on a monthly review of hydrocarbon prices, but on a quarterly review. The Minister of Energy pointed to the possibility of adopting a monthly automatic adjustment system of hydrocarbon prices. The objective is to apply this mechanism from May 2020 in order to take advantage of falling oil prices on the international market. Aden Shaweshi, CGTN, Tunis.
And that story from Tunisia wraps up this segment of business. I'll be back at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be looking at some of the effects these lockdowns we're seeing in some countries and curfews in others are having on economies, and more government shutdown activity to try and stop the spread of COVID-19. How will economies cope? We'll find out at the top of the hour. For now, back to Richard.
Thanks a lot, Rama. The news continues on Africa Live. We've got a lot more news coming your way after the break, including bars reopen cautiously in China's Sichuan. We find out how they are coping after lockdowns.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. In Sichuan province, entertainment outlets were allowed to gradually reopen weeks ago. But a new notice on the 28th of March had asked KTVs, cinemas, and internet cafes to resuspend operations immediately. Bars have yet to be impacted as of now. Our reporter Weilin Tang spoke to two F&B outlets to see how they are coping as COVID-19 within China appears to recede.
Nestled in one of Chengdu's upscale neighborhoods, this Italian restaurant and bar reopened March 25th, but not before suffering a blow from the COVID-19 outbreak. It lost about 2 million yuan or $280,000 in its 2-month hiatus.
Before the outbreak, we made over $14,000 on our best day. Even on a bad day, we still made $3,000 to $4,000. But now we make just about $1,000 or less. So the difference is still huge.
Cheng Yijia has been in the food and beverage industry for 20 years. In that time, she's seen everything from the SARS outbreak to the deadly Wenchuan earthquake in Sichuan. Most eateries in China have jumped on the online delivery bandwagon. But Cheng isn't banking on this as a life-saving revenue stream. But she does foresee a change in people's consumption habits and preferences after the COVID-19 pandemic.
After the SARS and the Wenchuan earthquake, there was a surge in consumption. But the scenario this time is different. Consumers, especially the younger generation, are now more rational, and so we have adjusted our strategy. We have removed higher-priced items from our menu. Instead, we now focus on cheaper and value-for-money options.
Cheng says local government policies such as a temporary deferral of rent and electricity and water bill subsidies have helped the restaurant in reducing financial pressure.
On the 17th of March, the Sichuan provincial government said the F&B service industry can now fully reopen in low-risk areas under a set of prevention and control measures. This means they can now take in customers at full capacity. Now, while sentiments on the ground appear to be improving, there is still caution. Businesses here tell me they are walking on a rather tight rope to, on one hand, balance pushing out for more sales, but on the other hand, ensuring proper precautions such as crowd control.
Many bars still have to adhere to the daily 50% capacity limit. Even then, they have a hard time meeting this capacity. Chinese craft beer maker Great Leap Brewing is one of them. It says its online sales and beer deliveries are performing far better than dine-in figures. I asked if people are buying this positive news that sentiments are improving.
I don't think it's going to happen immediately. I don't think you're going to get a full widespread absolute trust that the situation is back to normal. And I think personally that that's healthy, and I think that businesses should allow customers to be somewhat reserved and immediately wanting to go back to locations. What we can do right now is we can take really good care of the customers who are coming out, who are venturing to our bar. We can take good care of them. Hopefully they spread the word.
Patience with a dash of optimism. Richard Nta, CGTN, Chengdu.
And up next is your sports news. Stay tuned. Here's what's ahead.